start drinking. That's okay. We don't need you here.
You don't need me here.
So we today are with Naomi Cataldo, the owner of Urban Row Photography.
I would have said that last name differently.
A lot of people say Cataldo.
A lot of
I would
people
have
do.
gone a hard L.
Cataldo.
No.
Cataldo.
No. See, we
Cow.
don't like that.
Yeah, with a hard L.
We are Cataldo.
Okay.
A hard O?
L.
Hard.
L.
Okay, whatever. Enunciate. Naomi Cataldo.
There you
I
go.
got it right. We made it sound like I got
I wasn't
it wrong.
saying you got it wrong. I'm just saying
I'm saying we made it sound
not
like
knowing her as well as you do, I would have gone with a hard L. That's all I'm saying.
I'll work on it. I'll get this right. Naomi Cataldo.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Owner of Urban Row Photography. We're going to get into all that.
Yeah.
But if I didn't lead this in with saying that my wife is your biggest fan, she would kill me. She's like, is today the day you're
Oh my
interviewing
God.
Naomi?
Katie.
Yes.
I love it.
I'm interviewing Naomi today. It's going to be great. And I'm nervous now
so-
because I know she's going to be listening. She doesn't listen to anything that I do.
Oh God. Oh God.
She's listening to
love
this
it.
one. So Katie, there
Okay.
you go. We're here with Naomi.
Love
Thank
it.
you for coming in.
Thank you for having me. I'm
Mm,
excited
thank
to be
you.
here.
This is your first podcast.
Yes, it is.
First
Yep.
ever?
First ever.
Nice.
I listen to a lot of them. I've never been on them.
What do you listen to?
Oh my gosh. So many, a lot of business focused podcasts. Not so much news and not so much like audiobooks or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find that I don't have a lot of time to listen with the kids home and everything. But if I'm doing anything like cooking dinner, I'll listen. So there's a happiness podcast I listen to. I'm sure you're not surprised because I just like to find more ways to be
I've
happy.
just never seen you without a smile.
I know,
Which is
I-
frustrating for somebody who rarely smiles.
So I should share that podcast with you.
There you go.
might learn something. But yeah, I don't even know. I've just gotten into them more and more while I'm working because since I edit a lot in front of the computer, spend a lot of time doing that. I can always kind of listen and be
Right.
into that kind of learning as much as I can. A lot of different ones.
Yeah, it's funny. I listen to podcasts when I'm trying to sleep. It like calms me down.
Yeah.
But I think a happiness one would be great because I listen to like the news.
Oh yeah,
and
that
I'll
would
wake up
put
in
me
the
to
morning
sleep.
like,
Maybe that's your problem.
I mean, yeah.
It's like your
yeah.
life hack, happiness
Right.
podcast.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. Yeah, if you can send that to
I
me, that'd
will.
be great.
I will.
Are there any good like photography podcasts?
So yes, there is. I don't know if there's an DC photographer. His name is Sam Hurd, who is a huge inspiration to me, and he has a podcast. I forget the name of it. I can share that. And then there is but like his work is very unique, and so he talks about like technique,
Right.
gear. He's a huge like gear techie kind of guy. So there's that from the photography side of things, and then there's more of like the client side, the business side,
Oh, that's
software.
interesting, yeah.
So kind of a lot. There's so many different like wedding photography podcasts I listen to, and
Will they go over like tips and
Yes.
and different
tips and like new industry like softwares, apps, that kind of thing. But I also have to say the one that just came to mind. So I've listened to a lot of Brene Brown,
Sure.
like,
My wife
more
loves her, yeah.
society,
Yeah, Katie.
human interest kind of things and like psychology, that kind of stuff, which right now has been really good because she's just such like calming. I don't know. I like her work.
Sure.
But yeah, photography. I try not to though, only listen to photography ones because I just feel like that's 99% of what I do. I'm like
Sure.
in my business all the time.
Yeah.
And it's good to take a step back and listen to like other kinds of industries and things like that. So
Yeah, and so definitely want to spend most of our time on Urban Row, right?
Yeah.
Plug away.
Okay. Thank you.
But we've known each other for a while. Our daughters met at like preschool.
Yeah, when
right?
they were 2. Yeah.
So, but I want to go back before that. So
Right.
tell us like, because I know you weren't always a photographer.
Right.
So go as far
All
back
right.
as you want.
All right.
And then, we'll get up to Urban Row.
Okay. And so just tell me if I'm rambling, but I was thinking a lot about how to succinctly kind of tell my story.
We have 3 hours to fill.
Good.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
good.
As
I'm
long as the
here all day.
batteries don't die.
Right, yeah.
I love it. Okay, so where did everything kind of start? So I went to school for architecture. I went to Syracuse University in upstate New York, and I often think back to like, well, how did I decide on architecture? Because I don't do that now, and like what interested me in that field. And so I remember when I was younger, I always loved going to bookstores. I read I devoured like Nancy Drew books. My daughter now does that with my old books. So I would go and like my biggest reward as a child was like getting to go to a bookstore and pick out a new book. Once I started going to, I remember this, Barnes and Noble, I would like go to the magazine section, and I was always attracted to like the home magazines, like pictures of different homes, really modern design. And I think that was one of the aspects of like, I was good at math. I loved art. I love home design. Like, I think that might be a career to pursue. Looking back on it, I think I was attracted to the photography of it.
Okay.
And like how you document something that is well designed, or just old, modern, traditional, all the different kind of aspects of architecture that I enjoy. I think like now hindsight is 2020, but I was kind of intrigued by the photography and how you showcase that. I still went to school for architecture, graduated with my professional degree. I worked in the industry in Baltimore. So let me back up. I never thought I would come to Baltimore. Like
Right.
that was never on my radar.
So you're from Long Island originally.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
I grew up on Long Island. One of the reasons I went to Syracuse was my mom was from Syracuse. Her parents, like she grew up there. So we would always go visit my grandparents over the summer in Syracuse. We would go to like the New York State Fair. It was a lot of fun. And so I felt comfortable around that campus. They had a great architecture program. So I kind of immediately knew in high school that I was going to go there.
Right.
If I got in. When I went there, I ended up working through the program, getting a thesis award for my design, which was a winery. So I don't know where that
fitting.
falls into. Yeah, I mean,
Knowing
I
you
love
now,
wine.
it's fitting.
We named our dog after our favorite wine, our original dog. So yeah, but when I graduated, I didn't know what city I would end up in, but I knew I did not want to go back to New York City, Long Island. Like that was not something I wanted. I wanted to kind of explore a new city. So I was looking at DC, Boston, Philly. I actually was born in DC, so I kind of like had this affinity. Like my parents worked at the Library of Congress. My dad worked for the Census Bureau. So like we would always kind of vacation in DC over the summer sometimes. So that was kind of a comfortable place for me. But I never expected Baltimore to be
Right.
where I landed, like a lot of people. And so one of an alumni of Syracuse. I know alumnus. I don't even know the word.
Don't make us
Right, yeah.
correct Latin grammar, please.
He graduated from Syracuse, and Adam Gross, who's the owner of Ayers St. Gross, the firm I worked for, he came to Baltimore, started this firm in the early 80s, and would always recruit from Syracuse because he's an alumnus of there. So when he came up the year I was graduating, saw my thesis, we started talking, and he invited me to come visit Baltimore for the first time. And I remember driving through like the Inner Harbor, Fells Point, being like, this is a really cool, like manageable size city.
Right.
It's really neat. I had nothing to go off of other than what I knew about the Inner Harbor. And so I decided to accept the job at that architecture firm in Baltimore. And that was in 2005. And so that actually, like, there's so many different points in my life that I'm like, oh my gosh, like that decision led to this. So started working there in July of 2005, sat down next to my husband.
Right.
Like I had no idea at the time.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to jump in here because I think this is really cool. You guys actually grew up like 20 minutes apart from each other in Long Island,
Yes.
right? Went to like rival high schools. Is that
Yep.
right?
Ran rival track teams.
So you've 100% crossed paths before.
Yeah, and we're waiting for that photo, like that family.
But you didn't know
contact.
each other when you were
Absolutely
younger,
not.
okay.
No. So I grew up in Kings Park, which is on like the north shore of Long Island,
Right.
and Anthony grew up in West Islip,
Okay.
which is the south
Yeah.
shore, and like literally on a
Yeah.
map, they're just directly north and south of each other.
Yeah.
That's funny.
20 minutes away. He has 5 brothers, so he's one of 6 boys, and like they play
Really?
lacrosse. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have just one sister. And so like, but my neighbor who still lives across the street from my parents, her son, I think, played soccer, and like Anthony knew of that family. My sister's track coach in high school is a good family friend of Anthony's. Like there's all these mutual connections
Right.
that kind of are on the periphery.
Yeah.
we didn't discover until
That's crazy.
I know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah, no,
interrupt you,
I'm
but
glad you
I think that's really cute, especially like now that you shoot weddings. Like that's a perfect story.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You're right. Yes.
You sat down next to your.
So we sat down, and like here's the other thing about us: we both like moved to Baltimore for our jobs. He was going to accept a job in DC, and like at the last minute took this Baltimore job at Air St. Gros. I, again, was looking in all different cities and like landed on Baltimore. And so we started a month apart. I started in August. He started in July. So he was already there. I remember sitting down and they like had our desks set up for the new interns kind of next to each other. And I didn't think anything of him.
Right.
And I knew that I didn't want to start a relationship. I had just graduated college. I was like exploring a new city.
Right.
I was going to kind of like see what what it's like to be an adult and live in my own apartment on my own. I didn't have a roommate. I wanted to like go out and see what it's like. And then, but we were friends because we worked together for a while. And I was like, this is my first job. I'm not going to mess it up by like dating a coworker. Like you don't do that. I remember having a conversation with my mom when we were going to go like on a trip together. And she's like, Naomi, but you work together. Like, don't mess this up. What are you doing? So we were friends for a while, started dating without anybody at the office knowing, and only told people that we were together when we got engaged, which was only 6 months after we started dating. So like in February of 2006, we got engaged and got married 2 years later. So we had a long engagement, which is like a whole nother story because he always jokes. We had a hurricane on our wedding day, but if we would have gotten married the first year after being engaged, it was like a beautiful, sunny 70-degree September day. So that's another story I also like to tell my couples, that like there are reasons and good and bad, pros and cons for like having long engagement, getting married quickly. Like I think you bring a certain energy to like your decisions. Yeah. And I always look, the glass is always half full type person and optimistic. So I think you can always find a silver lining in things like that. So yeah. If
I didn't know you, that would frustrate me so much that you're just so happy.
I think to a fault. I think it's definitely.
I'm actually obviously I'm joking. I think especially now with the way the world is and everything that's happening, like you need to be optimistic now. And I think I have to force it.
You do.
But I think force it? I do. I know. But again, just knowing you and seeing how you are with Anthony and your kids and like around your work and everything, it's like, it's really something to aspire to, especially now when like you really need to sort of promote happiness in a world where everybody's kind of freaking out.
It's for sure. Yeah.
So you're at ASG.
Yeah.
You've been there for when did you start, or like how long into ASG were you like?
So actually a while. So I worked at ASG so they are a higher ed. They primarily, like 90% of their work is in higher education.
They're designing higher education buildings. Okay.
So college and university campuses. Myself and Anthony were in the master planning kind of studio.
Right.
So we did like broad planning work for campuses. So I was in that studio until 2010 for the first 5 years. Photography was not on my radar. And then I switched to a building design studio. And then in 2010, but we had our daughter in 2012. So like right when I learned we were pregnant, I kind of started thinking like, oh, well, how are we going to document our kids?
Right.
And like, I want to have something more than a phone, which at that time, like iPhones weren't even much. I don't even know. 2012. I guess they were out, but it wasn't a thing.
I don't know.
I can't remember. Yeah.
We'll find out.
Naomi, was photography even like a hobby at this point?
Okay. So it not something that I did very often. Like backing up way back in elementary school, I took like the photography club after school thing. In college, I never really was into photography. So my dad had cameras that he would like tinker with and take photos of, but not to the extent of like ever thinking it would become what it is.
Gotcha.
I just liked documenting things, but not
You weren't strolling around the city on the weekend
well,
with 3 cameras
actually,
on. Okay.
Hold on. Yes.
Right, yeah, you were. Okay.
That happened, but
Okay.
not right away.
Gotcha.
I don't know. I just thought like, oh, we're having a baby. Like, let's figure. I would love to use. I had an old like an Olympus body, not Canon or Nikon, like Olympus, which
Do you have any idea what she's talking about?
Olympus is
No.
a
Neither
big
do I.
brand. You don't know? You don't
We're
know
gonna-
Olympus company?
No.
Okay.
We're gonna nerd out on gear later. But
Sorry.
you keep going.
I will just throw these things out. So I had an Olympus camera and like it was old, but I figured, oh, that can be used to take photos of our kid, right? Fast forward to my birthday of 2012, Anthony got me again, you might not know, but a 50 millimeter lens, like a pretty basic, versatile, easy to learn lens. That was in my mind going to be used to take like photos of our kid. So, but I had never used a DSLR camera body with a lens like this, which is so it's a prime lens, which means it doesn't zoom. So like if I'm standing here and I wanted to take a picture of like the car out there, it would be really far away.
Okay.
I would have to move my body closer to get it. Like you cannot zoom the lens in. So I was kind of like, I don't know how this works. I'm working downtown in this awesome place and I walked to work. So we actually both did. When Anthony worked for the city, he would walk and take the bus. No, he took the bus later. He would walk to work. I took the water taxi. So I'd walk from our house in Patterson Park down to Fells Point, and I started taking my camera with me and like just literally having it there, figuring it out, learning the settings. I wanted to shoot on manual mode, which usually most people use like automatic, where the camera decides the settings for you. I felt like, oh, it could be fun to just creatively get into learning this. So I brought my camera with me on my walks to work, and I would take photos of like the row houses, the park, not so much people because I was walking to work and I had to get there. Like it wasn't like there were any people subjects. So that's how I started to learn how to shoot with a DSLR on manual mode and like really learn the settings. I feel like I got way off track.
No, it's fine. That's
Yeah,
what we want.
It's
Like,
just, it's interesting. I mean, for somebody who like knows nothing about any of this,
Yeah.
you know, that's very interesting.
Completely self-taught. Like
Yeah.
I didn't take any classes while I was in architecture.
Right.
Like working as an architect, this was just a very much like a creative outlet
Right.
at that time. But again, I was like pregnant. So we were kind of like, there was a lot going on, but this to me was something I could just like dive into.
yeah.
Right.
So do you remember the first photo like that you, obviously not the first one you took, but the first one you took with your new camera? Do you still have that?
It's funny. So when I realized I enjoyed taking photos with this lens and this camera, and I felt like a little bit more confident in myself, I reached out to the neighborhood organization in Patterson Park, and I offered to take like a photo shoot of an engaged couple.
Mm-hmm.
I had never taken a couple. Like, I don't know why I thought of doing that. But I offered a free session. This young couple in Patterson Park won the photo shoot. We basically stayed near the pagoda in Patterson Park and like walked around. And it was my first time. I think it went well. Looking back at the photos now, I'm like, absolutely, this is ridiculously not what I do now. But it was a good start. And from that, like I started taking more and more people, and like living in Patterson Park on a row house alley street, there's people with their dogs. And like our neighbor, she asked me to take a photo of like her and her dog because her dog was old and she thought I might pass soon. And she wanted to have some like good photos of her dog. So like I just did as much as I could when I had the time. It was never something that I felt like, oh, this needs to be a business. Let me like learn everything I can at that time anyway. Right.
So you took that whole photo shoot with one lens.
Yes.
So and I do want you to critique our gear because, as you can see, I'm cheating. That one zooms in.
Is that a 20? It does.
So
It
again,
does.
somebody who's ignorant to all of this, why is it cheating? And like, what's the big
Naomi? Yeah, why are you asking me? She's a photographer.
Okay, so I
don't know.
It's not cheating, and that's a really good lens. It's a Canon 2470, maybe.
I think 16 to 35.
60, okay.
So here's what I know about Mark. He could walk into something and know nothing about it.
Yeah.
But he has to have Mark's really into his gear. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be the newest hobby, but he's got to have the gear.
The best.
Yeah, that's
gear.
what I know about Mark.
See, that is not me. Like that gear freaks me out, to be honest. And as a photographer, I don't know if I should say this, but it like overwhelms me and intimidates me.
Sure. Yeah.
So I did
totally
not
can get
do
that. Yeah.
Like I feel like I am the exact opposite of Mark. You're not a happy person. I'm not a gear person. Like,
why do you say that you're not a happy person?
You're not like naturally a happy person.
I'm not naturally happy. I think I have to force it. Yeah.
So I wanted to start slow and like learn the one thing I had, and then like it was never to me about like, oh, I have to get the most professional, high end, fancy piece of gear, because I just didn't know enough about like what that is. And to me, researching that stuff wasn't the enjoyable part.
Right. Okay.
It was more like getting it, using it, like mastering that one thing, and then moving on and up.
And it sounds like too, like getting into photography, the sort of the driving force behind it wasn't necessarily like a business at first, like you said. It was more like you just wanted to document something in your life. So maybe the gear wasn't all that important anyway. Yeah. I mean, you just needed something to use. Exactly. And then you kind of got into it afterwards.
Yep. That's so true.
So how did you get from like documenting your kids, taking random pictures of people and things, which I have a whole slew of questions about that. To like going, like at one point did you decide like, oh, I might want to make a run at a business of this?
It was a slow process. Okay. So I'll tell you kind of how I got to documenting my first wedding, which it was, so again, I'm in architecture. I'm working full time, having our daughter. She was born in January of 2012. So it got to the point where I was approached by our neighbor on our street in Patterson Park, the girl that I took photos of her dog. She was getting married for the second time and like had known and seen me out in the park taking photos. Again, I took photos of her dog. So she was like, hey, would you ever consider taking wedding photos? Like, me and Eric and I are getting married and we just want something. It's a small ceremony. It's like a restaurant in Fells Point. Would you ever consider taking them? And I had never taken a wedding, anything of that scale or size or complexity. And I was like, I've never done something like that. Are you sure? And she was like, Naomi, we just want one good photo. Like, I trust that you can take one good photo of us. It's our second marriage. It's nothing crazy big. Like, we just want that. And so because I had been like taking photos on the side, walking to work and feeling like better and better about that and enjoying it, I figured, you know what? Like, why not?
Right.
No pressure. I can do one good photo. Sure. Well, so the wedding was actually it's a restaurant that doesn't exist anymore in Fells Point, Mele. It was like a Greek restaurant. They had a basement. Literally their wedding. Well, no, they had a wedding in a church in Mount Vernon, but the reception was in the basement of this restaurant. No natural light, no windows, the darkest setting possible. And I was like, yeah, sure. I didn't know that when I said yes to the wedding, but looking back on it, my favorite photos, and there were beautiful photos of them in the park, in the church, but like the reception, I had no idea what I was doing. I was a little bit in over my head. So having said all of that, from that wedding, she used a florist that's local to Baltimore. And
who is that?
Local Color Flowers, who's still very successful to this day. And we're really good friends. Ellen, the owner of Local Color Flowers. This was back when Facebook was just kind of starting. Instagram wasn't even a thing, I don't think. If it was really early on. So when I shared her wedding photos, like the 5 or 6 that I really loved, I posted them on Facebook. I tagged the florist, Local Color Flowers, and I don't remember how quickly it happened, but soon after that wedding, which was in June of 2012, I was contacted by, and I think I had like a really basic website set up.
Right.
I didn't know what I was doing. Web design wasn't my thing. So I just had like something basic at that point. Mainly Facebook was my like photography presence. I just posted all of my stuff there. I got contacted by a couple who was getting married in September of that year. So it was only a few months away, who wanted a really locally focused vendor team for their wedding. They were a little bit older. They wanted all local vendors. And she saw that I had tagged Local Color Flowers, and she, the bride, was friends with the owner and was like, oh my gosh, like who is this? Like, maybe you can photograph my wedding. Turns out they were the owners of, I don't know if you remember, Chesapeake Wine Company in Canton.
Right.
Debbie and Mitchell, who are an amazing couple that I absolutely love. I mean, a lot of my success can be traced back to like people that I met in our neighborhood that trusted my, I don't know, like personality, kind of approach, style. And so I met with her and she said, I really want a local team. We're getting married at our store, like our wine shop in Canton.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was really cool. And the Patterson Park Pagoda was where their ceremony was, which you can't really have ceremonies in the park, or at least you couldn't back then. Like it was just a thing normal people couldn't do, but Mitchell was part of the organization that helped, like donated. Yeah. Something like that, where he was able to get access to have their ceremony there. So they had this like New Line band because they love New Orleans. They go there. New Orleans. I never know how to say that. New Orleans?
I think you're
NOLA.
I wouldn't say Nolans.
That's
not the one I would have chosen.
New Orleans. I'm sure it's wrong to some people. But they love that. So they had this like band that walked them from the pagoda in Patterson Park to Canton. We like paraded down the streets. Cool. It was such a cool way to have like a really intimate wedding. That was my second wedding. And they utilized a wedding planner, Lemon and Lime Event Design, who I don't know how they get connected, but like that was my first experience with a formal kind of wedding planning team. And I didn't realize it when I got connected with them, but they were also kind of just starting their business in 2012, 2013. And they are a group of, it's two women, Katie and Ashley, who started their business after a meeting at like this marketing agency near Locust Point, where I was working as an architect. Like it's kind of crazy. Like we were close by physically and where we were working, never crossed paths. And they left that to design this event planning business. And so when I connected with them, that was my second wedding. They referred me to other couples that like I got a few more weddings from, but I still was doing maybe 2 to 3 the first year. And then like the second year of photographing weddings was like maybe 5, maybe. I mean, it was a slow, like, again, this is just on the side. It's a fun thing to do when I go to my 9-to-5 job and like look forward to this on a weekend. We didn't have I just had our daughter. So it was still like mainly myself, Anthony, and like our dog and little baby. It was an easy life back then.
It's funny. So you did 2 to 5.
Yep.
I'm skipping ahead to right now, but I want to come back.
Okay.
How many did you do?
So
I know 2020 was a strange year.
It was, but I still in 2020 did 21 weddings.
And then how many years?
This year I have 23 on the books.
Booked out already?
Oh yeah.
Wow,
this year. And then in 2022 I have 5 already booked.
Wow.
But it was like this, for the most part before 2020, I was doing between 15 to 18.
That's a ton. That's a ton of weekends.
It was it is a lot. While I was working full time as an architect, I don't think I ever did more than 12. I think 9 was like almost a breaking point. And then when I hit 12, I was like, this is not sustainable. And I really enjoy the photography thing. Right. So there were a lot of conversations, and Anthony will tell you, many years of me thinking this could be something I do and like leave architecture for. But at that point we had our son in 2015. So we had 2 kids. I was still working as an architect at that time and photographing close to 12 weddings.
Jeez.
So a lot of late nights. I've always been a night owl. I think architecture did that to me. Like studio nights, we would be late in the studio and like I loved it. It was just hanging out, like working, but also just having fun with like colleagues, like other students. And I think I just never outgrew that night owl thing. Like I don't mind staying up late. So when I knew that it was something I enjoyed doing and could do more of, I was like, well, I'm going to just work until midnight, 1, 2, get up and go to my architecture job. But then it started to get a little bit like muddy in the sense that I would be at my architecture job thinking about building my business. Right. What can I do differently? Like, what do I have to do when I get home? What's on the to-do list? How do I start marketing? Like it just started becoming all consuming.
And that was like 2016-ish where you started thinking about
Yep. Like right after. So we had, like I said, I had my son in 2015. And at that time, I still remember these like milestones where Instagram was starting to get bigger. And when I was on maternity leave, I remember thinking like, I can spend a lot more time marketing myself. I'm not working as much. And so I really pushed Instagram in like it was probably while I was pregnant, 2014, 2015. And like tried to build a following, tried to get a lot of work up there and connect like word of mouth referrals from past couples, even though I didn't have that many.
Right.
So thinking that I thought in 2015 that maybe like the following year would be the year I went full time. But looking back, we were not ready. Like we had two kids young in daycare and a lot of expenses. And I probably would have done it sooner, but having that backlog of people booking was important to know that I had like enough to carry me through.
Yeah. When I guess in any business, when you're going from steady paycheck where you can plan your finances 2 years in advance, because you kind of know the incremental steps you're going to get to, okay, now I run my own business. If I don't shoot a wedding, I don't eat.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, we went through some of this stuff when I was going from the fire department to real estate. Same thing, right? So, and I remember coming to you a lot when I was thinking about leaving and asking how you did it, because you went full time in 2018,
like May of 2018. Yeah.
So I wanted to. You touched on your early sort of social media presence when Instagram was coming on. I think you kill it on social media, but I wanted. How has your mentality changed? Like, what back in 2016 when you were really starting to focus on Instagram and Facebook, what did you have a plan for your marketing? I know you were trying to get other local vendors to.
Yeah, I didn't really have a plan, but I knew that like, so there were these things called like styled photo shoots, styled shoots, and like editorial shoots that people would do and like share that all over social media, where it's basically like models or couples taking wedding photos that it's not a real wedding day. It's like a photo shoot that you set up to look like that. And then you can use that to market yourself if you haven't done that many weddings. Okay. Like, hey, here's my style. This is what I can do. When like I did a few of those in the beginning and shared those on social media because I didn't have a ton of weddings. And that allowed me to get kind of that like social proof of, like what my work looks like, what my style is like. But I didn't really have a plan, like a social media marketing plan. I actually, to really share like some secrets, I never had a business plan. Like I didn't go to school for business. And so I kind of wish I had.
Right.
But I never really, like I talked to some friends who own their own businesses when I was starting out, and they're like, you should definitely have a business plan. I don't know what a business plan is, but
help me write one.
Yeah. And like, but then I started like, well, why do I need I know a business plan is helpful and a good thing to have, but also I wasn't planning to like, in my mind, I thought I need that if I go to the bank and like want a loan, or I need to show somebody what my business plan is. I don't know what my business plan is. Like, I'm just trying to get the next one. And I know looking back, like it would have been helpful to kind of strategically point yourself in the right direction. But I didn't have plans, marketing plans, social media plans, business plans. I had a lot of lists everywhere, all over the place. Like I just had so yeah, I guess my strategy became, I don't know if it was like sustainable or smart, but I just was on it all the time because I felt like that was a way that I could easily do something to further my business and advance my presence there and get like word out while I was like, you literally have a phone and you can access the app while you're working at your desk, or while you're walking to the water taxi, or while you're nursing your kid, or like there was just, I could always be doing that.
Right.
So I pushed hard on that. And I also noticed that a lot of people that were on Instagram and social media early weren't just sharing about like their work. The idea was also just share about yourself as a person, your personality, your interests, and like connecting with people. Even to this day, to me, connecting with people on things that like you share commonalities like for is the best way I find to meet people that are similar in, like personality, interest, a lot of people hire, I think, small businesses based on trust and like liking the people they're around.
100%.
Like it's not, you have to be good at what you're doing,
Right.
but I don't think it's just that.
I mean, we talk about it all the time with our clients. Like we say, I mean, obviously, real estate, but I say to clients every single time I meet a new client, like, if it's not a good fit, you should choose somebody else. Like, I mean, I think it's so true. If it's not like, you can get all the business in the world, but if you and that particular client don't click, you could be the most talented at what you do. Yeah. But if your personality is not a good match, it's just not gonna, it's not gonna work out. Yeah.
You're not gonna want to keep thinking about being around them, you know? And
and if your client hates you or you hate your client, which happens, right? I mean, like maybe not to that extreme, but like if you guys just don't like each other, what's the point? Yeah. There's no amount of money in the world that's worth, being unhappy, especially when you own your own business and you have the luxury of not having to do it. It's not worth it.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Especially in your industry, I think we can kind of fake it. I feel like
maybe
to an extent.
I mean, I feel like I'm very privileged and lucky at this point where like, if I sit down with somebody, I'm like, I'm not a good fit for you, which is very possible. I'm like, here's a few other people that might be.
Oh, wow. I mean? So you actually will like kind of do that, like come up front and say, like, if you
I won't say it to my client
okay.
that direct, but I've definitely sat down with people and been like, I'll strangle this person if I have to work with them. But Mark is a lot more patient. How about Mark takes them? You know what I mean? Or like this person's too new to know any of these idiosyncrasies about this person. Let him take,
Yes.
So 100%. Yeah.
Oh my God. See, that's so funny. Yeah. I mean, it's a very personal industry, though, like weddings and intimate things, like you're at somebody's most intimate big day.
You get one shot.
Yeah.
That was a nice little photography pun.
One
by accident.
It was good.
Yeah. So when you are taking someone's pictures at their wedding, there is no, let's go back and redo it.
Right.
Right. So where in our job, like I said, you might be able to fake. You might, because the time frame is so minute. Like we're with you. Sometimes we're with clients for a long time.
Right.
But for the most part, I mean, we're with somebody for 3 months. Right. You will send them pictures that they will be showing their great grandchildren. You can't screw it up.
That's true.
So let's jump ahead now. Like it's 2017.
Yeah. Okay.
The numbers are working out.
Yep.
You've got 15-ish weddings a year, right? You go to your conservative with numbers. Husband.
Yes.
Right. We got to throw that
with
in
numbers,
there. Conservative
right?
with numbers.
Let's be clear.
Husband.
Yeah.
And say, hey, love of my life, I really want to do this full time.
Yeah.
How did that
conversation
How'd that go? Like, well, first, what made you know you were ready? Right. Because I think that's going to help a lot of people. Because I sat down with you, like I said, right, when I was going to switch to leaving the fire department. What made you know you were ready to jump into being a small business owner? And then how did you go about sort of proving to yourself that you were ready to go?
So how did I know I was ready? I think I just felt like this was all I was thinking about, and I enjoyed that. And I felt like if I got to this point where I never knew how to shoot with the camera I've photographed a number of weddings, like, and not on my own, I should say. My husband was my second shooter second shooter kind of from the beginning, because there was this like nervousness of being that person documenting somebody's most important day that's going to live for generations, and not fully feeling like there was this imposter syndrome for sure of like, I don't know, I didn't go to school for this. Who's telling me I'm ready to take these next steps of doing this? So I had Anthony there in the beginning primarily to be like helping with gear, a second hand of like setting up flashes if I needed. He was also shooting photos, but I was still the primary person because he was there kind of as an assistant more than anything else. So that built my confidence in feeling like I know what I want my photography to look like, because I was able to kind of like train him and direct him and like translate what the vision was in my head for a certain type of shot to what I wanted it to look like. Like we would, I mean, this is silly, but we would sit down like at night and I was constantly talking about photos or like critiquing things or talking about what I would have done differently.
Yeah.
So I had Anthony there as like this kind of comfort to like allowing me to feel like we had the day covered. There were two of us there.
You started booking more weddings. You started making additional income, and it wasn't really a side gig anymore. It was starting to sort of transition into, hey, I sort of have to do this full time to take the next step. Right?
Yes. I knew there was like going to be a breaking point where either I abandon doing this as much as I am and just focus on architecture, or I go full like steam ahead with this. And because it just wasn't sustainable lifestyle wise to work as hard and much as I was. And I would slowly start increasing my prices and realizing that like people were wanting what I was doing. I would look at other photographers' work and I felt like I brought something different to the table for two reasons. I felt like my architecture background allowed me to see things differently. Like to me, composition is huge. And I would always compose an image in the camera and want to get it right when I shot it instead of relying on like, oh, I can edit this differently. Because I knew that I didn't have the time to sit there and edit things till like for hours and hours a day. I had kids, I had another job. So like to me, I felt like my design background was unique. And then I also just hated photos that felt superposed, staged, stiff. Yeah. And like, I always put a lot of pressure on myself to make sure that the photos feel natural, genuine, dynamic, and like interesting, that you want to look at them more and more. And like, not like, oh yeah, that's a cool shot. But no, it should be friggin' awesome. If I'm spending the time and my energy to like learn more and more about this craft, I wanted it to be different than what I saw out there. And I felt like I was, and I knew myself like that once I get into something, I kind of don't stop. And I felt like that trying to convince Anthony of like, I know I can do this. It was more about like getting the numbers to prove that to him to go full time. And so once I started getting more and more and feeling like I had that kind of backlog of couples signing with me, I was like, okay, this is a real thing that I can do. And like now it's just a matter of doing that and like quitting your full-time regular paycheck job. That was scary as anything.
Yeah. Were you nervous to tell your
did
your boss know it was coming? Or?
Well, that's one thing I will never forget. I thought everybody knew. I mean, some people at my architecture job knew that I take photos, knew that I would talk about the weddings I had, but I didn't really make it a very known thing because I was worried that people would start to be like, why aren't you working as hard, or like this and that. And so I was still convinced that everybody knew. Yeah. So the day I told my boss and like my kind of direct supervisor, they said they had no idea, and they wished me luck, and I would always have a job if I came back. And I was shocked because I really thought it was going to be like oh, that makes sense. Like you could have worked a lot harder. No, I felt like I was not a good employee. I really felt guilty about it. And I was like living these two separate lives. Like I would park my car in the office at the architecture firm and like still be thinking about all the photography stuff I could do. I would like walk in and just be distracted from the second I got in because I was like, I don't really want to be doing this. Yeah. My heart's not in it. Yeah.
And that's really when you know it's time. When, like you said, when all you can focus on is this one thing. And it's funny with you, like you said, it didn't really cross your radar until sort of you already had a career. You were starting a family, and then all of a sudden like, oh, I'm going to completely change career paths that are sort of not related at all.
Yeah. Exactly.
But when you get that feeling of, hey, I have to do this, it's almost easy. Like, you feel like you're lying to yourself. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So then obviously the mindset changes. This is what I do for a living now.
Yes.
How do I go ahead and keep this constant pipeline of business? Yeah. Right. And again, I want to come back to your social media because that to me is really impressive what you do. I remember even telling my wife, like, Naomi's on this thing all the time.
Yeah, that's probably a bad thing.
48 stories. No, but it's like,
bad. I'm like addicted, I think.
But the thing is,
I don't know. I think it's a bad thing.
But a couple things,
But at
right?
least you can always phrase it as marketing.
Right. It is.
Right.
I tell my kids that all the time. Mommy,
That's
put the
right.
phone down. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
But so I have a couple questions. One, as a photographer, your job is boiled down to its like, I guess, first variable is content creator.
Yeah.
You're creating content for somebody else, right? So naturally, with the rise of social media, like, well, here's a place for me to put my content.
Mhm.
So it just makes sense, right? But then as you started to leave and transition to photography full time, did you have the name Urban Row already?
Yes. And I have a funny story about like, I was wondering if you were going to ask me why the name Urban Row.
I am going to get
so
there.
I can tell you.
I am going to get there. But as you're leaving and you start photography full time, you dive heavier into social media.
Yeah.
Like, I want, if you don't mind, can you talk about your brand development? Because you have very strict, it seems like strict, like these are my fonts and these are my colors. And so did you learn that? How did you go about coming up with that?
Great question. That was another thing I felt like I needed to have polished and in place before I went full time. So that same year I left architecture, I hired a brand designer because I didn't have a logo. I designed my own logo at first for years. That was like, I'm not going to spend money on this when I'm new and it's not really a thing. So I just had my own and it was not taking me to that next level.
Sure.
So I hired a branding logo designer. She identified brand colors, fonts, but it was this huge process. In a way, it was kind of like this eye-opening experience for me about a brand is not just, like you are your brand, but it should speak to your style, approach, personality, background. So there was a lot of discussion at that point in time with me and her about like, what does your work represent? What's important to you? Why does it look the way it does? And so going back to the architecture background, like I like things to be clean and crisp and simple. Like I think less is more in certain instances. And so my brand, I wanted it to speak to that. So like my fonts are really crisp and modern. My colors are a little bit brighter than some and like vibrant and colorful, but at the same time, not like overly punchy and saturated and like neon crazy. Like to me, there's something timeless about a pop of color balanced by like white space and like a black in certain areas is good to use, but like overdoing any color or it just dilutes it. So I was trying to be really strategic about what the fonts were, and she helped me with that. So I established the look and brand right before I went full time, redid my website. And I actually used like a template for my site, but I completely built it like kind of on my own as well.
Just kind of learning as you did it.
Yeah.
Wow.
I used Squarespace. I still use Squarespace, but they weren't the first place I went for a website. I used like some crazy like Q photo. I don't even think it's a thing anymore. I used WordPress for a while. I had my blog in one place and like my site in another, and they weren't connected. And so like there was a lot of behind the scenes that I had to like figure out. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. So then when did Urban Row?
Okay.
Was that was after you already started full time?
So the name was always Urban Row.
Okay.
Like even when I shot that first wedding and that first couple that I like gave away a free session, I don't know. Now I'm thinking back. I knew if it was going to become a business, I didn't want my name.
Right.
Like I didn't want it to be Naomi Cataldo Photography because this is just me. I have this like weird thing. I wanted it to be different and unique and not like typical. And Anthony and I have this joke all the time that I'm always like, it can't be typical. That's so typical. Like every photographer I had kind of encountered was always like their name was their photography.
Right.
And I wanted my background to be represented in the name. So like urban. So when I first moved to Baltimore, I knew I wanted to live in the city. I love city life. I felt like there was so much to it that like is always different, always changing. And so I wanted my business to reflect like urban city life. So that's where the urban part came from. And then like I debated, do I do something like parkside photography or like Patterson because that's where I first moved to and lived and like learned how to kind of like enjoy city life. But that was actually taken. Like I looked up Patterson Park or something with that in it. I felt like, oh, somebody already has that. So I have to be more creative. And I ended up with Row because it's kind of cheesy, but like my first few photos when I was exploring the city by myself, like figuring out the camera, were always of row houses. Yeah. And I felt like, well, row houses are kind of all the same when you go down the street from the outside, but they're all very different inside. And I was like, oh that's kind of like couples, like deep. A wedding. Yeah. No, it's so cheesy. But like a weddings are kind of all the same from a concept, right? Like people are getting married. There's these traditional, typical steps you go through on a wedding day. However, every couple is different. Every venue is different. Like every situation is different. Their priorities are different. So like it kind of relates back to that like connection of like row houses being that conceptual thing.
So that's a good segue into. You have a question?
I have a question before you get into that. So you mentioned all these different parts of the business. You're designing a website. You have a blog going on. You're obviously the photographer. I assume there's a lot of business stuff in the background. I think that's one thing that people never understand when you own your business, especially in the beginning. You are all everything.
Of the things.
Were you doing all these things before you went official? Like when you were official business, did you already have a blog? When you switched over, was that a bit of a shock to you having to do all that stuff?
No, I was doing a blog early on. I was doing the website and I was sharing on Facebook and Instagram, social media. So I think the only things that I had to change kind of like to do differently and learn that like, oh, when you're a full-time business owner, this is what you do, is more of like the back end business stuff. Okay. But I think that's because I didn't enjoy it. And I like figured, well, that'll come when I'm like a business.
Right.
But the blog and I think I marketed differently in the beginning. I felt like it was because I had the luxury of having a full-time job. I would meet people for coffee. This is something that I think like I'm grateful to have had. I changed my hours at ASG to be able to have Fridays off. So I worked 4 10-hour days, knowing that a part of it was to be home with my kids and like when they were younger, but also being able to develop the business and meet with people. So like I used those Fridays to set up coffee dates with other people in the industry. So like some planners that I had never worked with that I wanted to. So I kind of used like my time to connect with people and network with people a lot in the beginning, instead of being like, oh, I have to figure out the business side. You know, to me, it was like, let's just have coffee and connect and meet up that way and see where that goes and like learn from them, learn from their experience, what they use as a business, kind of like back end stuff. We had a lot of conversations, and I think that allowed me to then, when I was ready to go full time, like have that knowledge base.
Gotcha.
You know, like knowing what they had to deal with before I left architecture.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Cool. That's a good question. You guys are full of good questions.
We studied hard.
I love it.
So I wanted to jump into your process now, right? The business is sustainable. I mean, it's more than that. I mean, it's like you're already booked into 2022. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of people can say that, especially going through 2020.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to talk about.
Okay.
2019, life is peachy. You've left your job.
Yeah.
You're
like first.
You have a ton of weddings. You're loving it. I'm sure you have more than one lens by this point. What kind of camera do you have now?
I have 3 Canons. Mark IV is my main one, and then I have 2 Mark IIIs. And I don't even, probably 6 or 8 lenses, but I only primarily use 3.
That's okay. We're going to tag Canon and try to get you
Yeah.
You know what my favorite piece of photography equipment is? Do you have one of those gunslingy things?
Oh yeah, like my harness.
I think they're hilarious.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I think when I see people with those on, I'm like, huh, interesting. I kind of like that thing. Yeah.
I like yours is intense.
It is. It's leather and it's like has all these metal clasps and things. And
my immediate thought, and this is a little interesting to say, I'm going to admit that ahead of time, is I wonder who the first photographer that saw it somewhere else and went, I could adapt that for my industry.
Yeah. Like, where did they get that?
Yeah.
I know.
Sling.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's like a...
We have all
Why'd
these
you look at
jokes.
me like that?
Because it was either like a cowboy who like took his revolvers out and was like, I can hook my cameras up to it. Or it was like
Something else.
Yeah, it was something else. There was some freaky time that was like, I don't need this tonight. I'm going to put my cameras on it.
I just wanted to hear.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear him
no,
say
that's
freaky
Totally,
time.
yeah. There's not a human that sees one of those things that doesn't think that one of those two thoughts.
Oh
If
my God.
they're lying if they say otherwise.
2019 is a great year for
Yeah.
you, right? Bringing back to reality.
Yeah.
It's a great year. You've left. You're doing photography full time. Killing it. 2020 comes around. I'm sure you are already booked.
Oh yeah.
January
like the
1,
year's
you have
fully booked.
the year
Like-
totally booked,
Yeah.
right? February, everything's shut down.
Yeah.
When do people start? So 2 questions. When do people start calling you saying, hey, we got to figure something out? And then I love how you sort of pivoted into your micro.
Yeah.
I think you were one of the first people to start doing that.
Yeah.
I would love to hear the thought process behind that. How did you know to do that?
Mhm.
But so 2020, describe
Okay.
what that was like.
So I had 2020 lined up with, I want to say 18 or 19 weddings before January.
Yeah.
My first wedding of 2020 was actually Leap Day. So it's coming up on the year anniversary, like, so February 29th of 2020. We had that wedding. It was perfect. Nothing, like, I don't even remember hearing about Corona, and maybe that's just my ignorance, but like at that time, the wedding went full steam ahead. Great. Then fast forward. So it's like March 13th, everything shut down. I remember my kids' schools closed. I had a wedding March 28th that was booked. And that couple, I don't remember talking to them about changing anything until like a few weeks before. I mean, I think people were kind of like waiting to see, hoping for the best. So that wedding shifted pretty quickly and was postponed to like July. Because again, I mean, I'm sure you remember, like everyone was like, oh, by the summer we'll be fine. It's summer. You can be outside. Everything's gonna be fine.
The virus dies in the heat.
That's what we're all
exactly.
told,
The virus goes away. Fall's gonna be fine. We're gonna move everything to like September, October. So in March, I mean, but close to when things shut down is when people started asking me to postpone. And then March and April were a lot of shifted dates. But I didn't have, the majority of my weddings were booked in like June. May has never been a really big month. I think that used to be, but it's not as much anymore. So fall weddings were fully booked. Like September and October was super booked for me. People, I want to say, started shifting those dates pretty early too, like June-ish. We had conversations of like, this isn't going anywhere. We're going to move. Can we look at next year, like 2021? And so I also got really nervous about all of this, like a lot of wedding photographers, and started having so many Zooms and calls and like webinars about what's the state of the industry. Like, what are people doing? What's the protocol for your contracts? Like when you postpone a date, what do you do about fees you've already collected? What do you change on the contract? I mean, there's so much that I've learned, have had multiple iterations of contracts because things change constantly. And like, you have to make sure you're protected, but also the couple is protected. And I've had so many conversations. I mean, now when people book with me, we always talk about like, well, what's your policy for cancellation, postponements, all of that. And like, that was never something we usually talked about. You know, I used to be like, it's in the contract. Now I can recite it like while I'm
now
sleeping.
You're an attorney.
Yeah, which I don't want to be, but I mean, okay. So, so I started, when did I start pivoting a little bit and offering intimate micro weddings? I want to say it was pretty early on, because with the shutdowns and the limits of numbers, like we knew, I mean, most of the weddings I used to do were 100 to 200 people. When things like really cut back and you could only have, you know, like up to 30 or something like that. I had a conversation with the Lemon and Lime event design, the planners that I'm really close with and we do a lot of weddings with, about, hey, we're going to have to offer something different if we want to sustain like our business in 2020 and be there for when this is over. So we like got together and thought about, well, what are people going to be willing to do? What's their comfort level? And I just knew that no matter how different your wedding looks, you're still going to need photography. Like, I feel lucky in the sense that as an industry, or as a person in the wedding industry, a lot of other vendors have not been as lucky. Like DJs have suffered.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't need a DJ for a small dinner event that's like 12 people. Florists come like here and there. You still usually have flowers, but not to the same scale. But photography is something that I feel like there's always a need for good photography if that's your priority. And so I started offering 2-hour long packages for like a ceremony, some portraits, and a dinner reception or some smaller thing. And to be honest, I just put something together pretty quickly. I got a page up on my website and I put together like a PDF guide that I could share with people when they inquired about a smaller wedding. Put it together really quickly. And I have to say, I'm really proud of this. To be honest, to this day, when you search for micro wedding photographer, I'm ranked number 1 in Baltimore.
That's awesome.
Which like, I have this app, speaking of like technology and stuff, I have this app, I don't know if you guys know, it's called SEO Edge. And it's awesome because you can kind of put in keywords to see where you rank in those things. And so I have like a variety of different keyword topics that I look up and constantly monitor. So micro wedding photographer has always been, which I don't understand why, but I don't know if it's a combination of I started it pretty early on when people started just searching for it. And I also now have I had like 15 or 16 micro weddings that I shot last year. I never photographed intimate, elopements. They used to call it, now it's like micro wedding. It's kind of a combination of different terms. I never had time to do that because my weddings were always larger and I was pretty booked up. I always thought it would be cool to do. I like smaller events. I think there's like a very different pace to the day and you have more time to like breathe and enjoy who you're around and what's going on. So I always wanted to do more of it. And this, I think, has been a blessing in disguise because I had the chance to, and now I'm still booking into 2022 or less 2022 because I think most people are hoping that that's back to full-fledged weddings. But in 2021, I'm still booking some for like later this fall that are smaller micro weddings. And I love it. I love the opportunity to have a very different look to your wedding. Like all rules are off. Like there's no rules anymore. Weddings can be whatever you want.
Yeah.
Which I think is great.
Not to lock you in a corner and make you predict, but do you see like micro weddings sticking, like everybody's vaccinated, we're back to normal, it's 2026. Like, do you think micro weddings are around to stay, or is this a sign of the times and we needed a change?
No, I think there's definitely going to be a shift in like people that, because I have had many couples say to me, like, we actually are happy that we can't have the large wedding because we don't like to be the center of attention. And I've always wanted a small wedding. And so they're now like, there's this permission to have that and not have your 100 people, that your mom's coworker's sister that you don't know at your wedding.
Right.
And so I think it will be a trend in the future. I do think there are going to be those people that still want that party with like 200 people. So I think it's changed the industry in the sense that like people realize weddings don't have to be as cookie cutter.
Right.
They don't have to be as large and still important. Like, and from a business standpoint, I've had conversations with fellow photographers and other people in the industry that like, just because you have a small wedding doesn't mean you have a small budget to work with. Like, why not spend your money on like this amazing dinner for 20 people rather than like a mediocre dinner for 200, or have this like amazing band that you wouldn't be able to have the budget for I think there's like different priorities that come into play.
That's a great point.
Right. I mean, I think that the interesting thing about like that concept of like a micro wedding is that, people, first of all, not everybody has the same budget, like you just said, right? But I think a lot of times people, the mentality is like, we've all three of us had weddings, right? The mentality is like a small wedding is some way lesser than a bigger wedding, right?
Right.
But and like the only proof you have of however your wedding went is the photos, right? I mean,
yes.
Let's be honest with you. The only people ever remember about your wedding is the booze and the alcohol. I mean, the booze and the food, right?
Right.
You're the only person that remembers your wedding. So the only proof you have is the photos. And I always feel like people are like, well, if I have a small wedding, it's a crappy wedding.
Yeah.
But like, if you can provide these amazing photos of a 6-person, 10-person, 20-person wedding, and it's amazing, and people are seeing this, why not?
Yeah, exactly that. Like what you said, it's not lesser. I think that's what this has changed. Like that people have the permission to be like, I'm going to make an amazing day for 20 people.
Right.
And it can just be that way without, like, I'm sure, parents and elderly family will not understand it. There's still like a generation shift that has to happen.
Right.
But I think younger people now are realizing like, we want to start a family, we want to buy a house, we want to invest in whatever it is, or change jobs or move around.
Right.
Like, why are we going to spend $150,000 on a wedding if we can spend 50 or 30 or, you know, and invest in the places we want, like photography, good food, and a venue that's fun and different. Like, you don't have to have it at this hotel ballroom anymore.
Right,
like,
exactly,
you know, not to say anything bad about hotel ballrooms.
Yeah. We still want to do
yes,
those.
yes.
Do you have, I don't want to ask you if you have a favorite specific venue, but do you have a favorite type of, do you prefer outdoor weddings? I mean, we talked about like
question.
natural light. Your first wedding was in like a basement.
Yeah.
Do you like outdoors? Is it harder to shoot?
That's a really good question. I used to think, because it's funny, I never had the chance to do outdoor weddings right away, whereas a lot of photographers start with those. I didn't. I think because I was in a city in Baltimore that has a lot of historic venues, I like was forced to learn how to shoot in darker industrial spaces. So I always felt like, oh my God, I would give anything to have this like gorgeous wedding at a farm or a outdoor country club type space to have those photos. And then when I shot my first one, I was like, this is really tough. The sun is unpredictable. You could be in a spot you think is going to be great lighting wise, and then like a cloud comes or the sun comes out of the cloud and like there's this huge hot spot on somebody's face and you can't see them and you're squinting and you're dealing with people that are hot. So I actually don't love outdoor weddings. I do, for the fact that like it's a little bit easier to shoot from a space perspective. Like, you have more space generally to move around and get those angles that are the most beneficial. But I think I go back to the fact that my background in architecture, like I really appreciate and love spaces that are unique and different. So like, to me, industrial spaces, which are trendy and common now, are the most interesting. To come up with photos of people in a space that has like limitations where you have to break the rules a little bit and be creative is what I enjoy the most.
Yeah.
And like finding those pockets of light. So like in a lot of industrial warehouse spaces, there's not a ton of natural light, but if you look and you kind of like think creatively, you can use that to your advantage. And so that's what I love. That's what I think keeps me going, is I'll shoot at the same venue 6 or 7 times, but it's always different because you have to think on your feet. The couple brings a very different energy. So like, to me, I always recommend a few industrial venues that I know and love because of the character of like the walls and the windows. But I know that not every situation is the same on a given day. Like, the weather is a huge unknown. So even if it has a great, a lot of windows with natural light, you could have a super cloudy day, and I need to know and be confident in the fact that like I'll still shoot that just as well as an outdoor space.
Right.
Yeah.
So I definitely don't want to keep you forever, but I've got like, it's so interesting, but I have a couple more questions. If you've got a little bit more time.
Yeah.
So now when you're talking to a couple for the first time, they found you either through your website or through Instagram. I'm sure you get a lot of inquiries over social media. When you're talking to them for the first time, what does that meeting look like? What are you looking for? We talked about being comfortable working with somebody. Obviously, that's a two-way street, right? I'm not going to ask you, why would you turn somebody down? But that initial meeting, I'm assuming couples want the world. Yeah. And then there's reality of like, well, what can I afford? Yeah. Right. So how do you talk to a client and sort of get them the most of what they want while still not underselling yourself as a business owner?
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot. So
I talk a lot. Have we met?
It's a really.
I complain about that a lot.
You do.
Complain about that a lot. Okay. So the first meeting with a couple, it used to be, so I have a physical studio space, like office space where I used to work pre-pandemic. I still have that. And I love inviting couples there. I haven't done that since COVID, but if at all possible in the future, when we meet in person is ideal. Now I'm doing more video chats and Zoom calls, and that's fine. And that's worked out. But I do think it's important to have, like, to me, a phone conversation is the last thing I want to do. We do it and it can be done. But I think like seeing how couples interact with each other, if at all possible, I like to have both of them there with myself. So the 3 of us on a call, like a video chat, because you can learn a lot from how people are just amongst each other, and how they like tell their story. So I always start off with a few of the same questions. I want to know about them, like how they met. I don't want to talk about the wedding right away, because I think when all is said and done, like, you're with that person for a reason. I want to know, like, what makes you guys tick as a couple, why you decided they were the right person. Like, all of those things are really important to me to get at why they're getting married. So how they met, how the proposal happened. I like to hear that kind of, because that's exciting, and everyone's usually newly engaged. So it recently happened. I sometimes ask what they do in their free time as a couple to figure out, like, when we do take photos together for engagement photos, which I also absolutely recommend. And a lot of couples say, like, oh, do we need engagement photos? I don't want them. I don't like them. I don't feel comfortable. That's a whole nother topic, but that is so important to the process. At least I think, because I don't think anyone should meet their photographer on their wedding day for the first time. And they're like, who is that? Our photographer? Is that guy our photographer? I have no idea. I want you to know me, and I want it to feel like I'm a friend that's there that day.
Yeah.
So on those initial calls, I like to try to get a little bit more personal and, like, hear their story. And then we dive into the wedding planning process, and I hear any concerns they have. But a lot of people that I work with, the couples I find the most ideal are the ones that prioritize photography. Like, some red flags to me would be when people are like, I want good photos, but I really don't want to spend a lot of time taking them. Well, and I get that. And I don't want to keep you away from your wedding. But if you do want good photos, like, some of that takes some time to get used to, because unless you're models who are in front of the camera every day,
Right.
You're not going to have, like, 3 minutes and have an amazing session and, like, gorgeous photos right away. Everyone needs to warm up. Even myself, when I'm behind the camera getting, like, my own photos taken with my, like, as a couple with Anthony or just myself, it takes a while, and you can't, like, rush the process. It's kind of like a comfort thing. So I like to try to make sure we have engagement photos. And by doing that, learning where they like to hang out, where they go on, like, a date, let's go there. Like, who says you have to have engagement photos at a certain prescribed location? Where do you guys like? Do you guys like to go to a brewery? Do you like to go to, I don't know, like, hiking in the woods? And, like, let's do that for part of our time together. So getting to know them as a couple is really important to me.
Yeah. That's awesome. And again, like, it's their day. You are, when it comes down to it, working for them.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
that's true.
Like, they need to feel like, not that they're in control, right?
No, but, like,
bride moms, maybe.
Yeah.
Right? That's a whole different
thing.
podcast.
Yep.
It's real estate dads. We
I
found.
love it. Oh my God.
But you work for them, even though it's an artistic field, and even though they're hiring you for you, which I think maybe sometimes they forget the day of, right? Like, balancing that, hey, I'm going to get you the best photos possible. You just have to listen to me, with, like, I know you're the bride and I want you to have the best day. To me, that seems like a pretty tough task. You're working, they expect a certain product, but you can't yell at them and tell them you need to come outside now.
Yes, right. And I try my best. I'm not a yeller, except sometimes to my kids, but, like, I do try to push as much as I can. But at a certain point, you have to, like, read the room and realize that they're feeling stressed and rushed, and for whatever reason don't want to go outside right now. Like, I've had plenty of people, so weather is a huge thing. And not rain. Like, it can be a purely beautiful sunny day, but the heat is something that, like, we have to absolutely deal with around this area. And I had a couple that, it was at a waterfront venue in DC. It was absolutely beautiful, but she felt like being outside too long, it was going to be, like, sweaty, and makeup was going to be a thing, and hair was going to change. And so I realized that, and I really wanted to take photos outside with her and her husband, but she didn't really feel like it. And so we took, like, maybe 3, and I had to figure out how to take gorgeous photos inside the air conditioned space. And so, like, I only push so far, because, like what you said, they're hiring me to document their day. It's not really about me. I mean, if I want beautiful photos at a certain venue and I know I'm not getting it, I will then plan a separate photo shoot. Like, to me, creatively, it's about making sure they're documented as best as the situation can allow.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point when you're talking about spending money on a photographer for your wedding. There's a reason why you want to spend a little bit more to get a professional, right? So you have that experience. You are worth that extra money. You're not just, you didn't make a number up and say, this is what you're going to pay me now. Right. It's years of experience. It's years of being able to be a therapist, wedding planner, time scheduler, like all these things come into what you're worth as a photographer, and why it's important to maybe not go with someone who's going to do it for $200.
Right.
You just realize the product you're going to get. It's important to pick the right person based on obviously what your budget can sustain. But for me, if I'm going to spend money on something on my wedding, it's going to be photos, because like you said, that's the only way you're going to remember it.
I mean, I remember just a personal anecdote from our wedding. It's funny you mentioned the heat. When my wife and I got married at the BMA, it was in excess of 100 degrees. And I just remember, and I won't mention the photographer, we were not too thrilled with our photos. And it wasn't our first choice either. The first photographer we chosen, his name was Arthur Remnijan. He had passed away.
Oh, wow.
Prior.
Okay.
But I remember how shockingly expensive it was. I remember like our wife and I talking about like, okay, it is what it is. I just remember being so frustrated with the photographer.
Really? Like, was it that day or once you got the photos back? Like, even on the day, were you feeling
that day mostly?
Oh, really?
And like not like understanding less than I understand now, but I just remember thinking like every photo is so staged. Like everything like was like, oh, we always have to be standing here. And I remember like I remember my wife was like, please tell this guy to leave me alone. Like, I remember like, dude, if you ask me to come outside one more time, or like, like seriously, like, do you want, like, it's so hot outside. Why are we standing here? Or like, I just remember like, I just remember like at some point I was like, I don't care anymore.
I know. And then
like,
that shows on your face.
Yeah. Like I was like, I just want to go inside and I want this dude to leave me alone. And I don't like you anymore. And like, but it wasn't, it wasn't because it's not that I did not value the photography. It was just like, I was just so frustrated at like, I felt like the whole balance, like, hey, we really enjoy not stage stuff. We want everything to be natural. And like, I'm not super comfortable in front of a camera, like just kind of take pictures as we are. And I remember it was like hours of just like, we'll stand here, do this,
and
hold
put your hands here,
do this, and like, and there was nothing like challenging about. There was nothing like.
Wait, it wasn't hard for you to do, but
there was nothing like there's nothing fun in the photos. Like there was a couple at the end that were fun. Like we broke a couple rules, like jumped into the fountain. We weren't supposed to. We like ruined my wife's wedding. Like that was fun, but like at the like there was no understanding like our personality, and it was very frustrating, the whole thing. But like you said, like understanding what you're about to spend money on is super important.
It is a fine line. I mean, and experience teaches you that. Like in the beginning, when you're first starting out, you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna have 2 hours with the couple. We're gonna gallivant around the entire property. No, there is no time on a wedding day. And like, you need to realize that as a photographer, I take advantage of every single second I get, because I know that like the bride might say to me and the groom's like, totally cool. Yeah, whatever you want. I want good photos. Right. I know the day of, who knows what happened that morning? Who knows what the mom said? Who knows who hasn't eaten lunch and is like hangry? I mean, all of that happens. Who's the guy drank too much the night before? Like, I know that there is a small window of time for me to get good photos. And so I will like maximize as much time as we have, because I know that like you're not going to want to stand out there for 2 hours. Yeah. It's true. Do
you want to do a quick 30 seconds on vendor meals and why?
The
photographer should get the meal that the couple's eating?
That is my
I know. Made sure we were like feed everybody. Like we were
good. You were a good client.
A lot of people a little inside baseball, but I think it's funny.
Yes. So just a little clip about that is that I feel like, so you hired us, like you said, to document all aspects of the day. So if who in their job, I don't know, doesn't eat for 8+ hours at all? Like, I mean, we're hired for, usually I'm there at least 8 hours, sometimes 9, maybe 10. And I used to feel guilty about sitting down to eat. And then I realized like no other job works an 8-hour, 9-hour day, carrying heavy gear, running all over the place, not skipping a beat, and like doesn't eat. And so eating is good, but also eating at the right time. So and
it keeps your photographer happy.
Exactly. Why don't you want to keep us happy? Right. I mean, we want to do the best for you as long as we're not going to pass out. Yeah. Right. Keep us happy. Yeah.
You said you had a couple of questions.
We've kept most of those got answered just in the conversation. I guess what I do want to hear though, so do you only do wedding photography now mainly, or do you shoot? I mean, I know you've done some headshot stuff for us. I think that was more as a favor, but
I do some like small business portraits, like headshots,
Yeah.
but 98% of my business is
weddings,
weddings. Yeah.
But you also you and your husband have a design company as well.
Yeah.
Right?
So I like to tell people I'm a recovering architect because like I will never not be that. And so Anthony, trained in architecture, works in the planning design world still now. We consult with couples that are similar to us in that like when we first bought our row house, it was a Section 8 rental. And Anthony had the vision of like, I can put in sweat equity and make this what we want and like be creative because we have the background of turning spaces into really efficient, like utilizing the efficiency out of that space. So we designed our first row house together, renovated that. The house we're currently in now was also completely gutted. And so it's kind of been like circumstantial. Like we just didn't have the budget as young, like 22-year-olds to buy something that was finished. And Anthony enjoyed the process of learning it, doing it himself, putting like his hands to it.
Because
so
he's crazy.
He's crazy. He's so crazy talented. He and I work well together, but he's definitely the one that runs that like design aspect of the business.
And that's Urban Road Design.
Urban Road Design. And our strength is in conceptual design. So like people that might buy a house or even see a house before they buy it and be like, I love so much about this house, but the kitchen is really small and I wish it had like a master closet or a master bath, but I don't know how to get there.
Right.
Some people would walk away for that, but we feel like there are so many ways to be creative with space so that when we come in, it's early on, we will hash out a few different design ideas of like, well, you could organize the space this way, that way, take down this wall, and it will completely change the look and feel of the space. Or have you ever thought about turning a closet into a half bath, which I don't know, we did that in our house.
Right.
You turned my closet into a full bath.
We love closet baths.
Yeah.
We've done that we found a half bath in our row house that like was just a corner of the kitchen that was underutilized. Why can't that? So we kind of try to be, we're not going to produce architectural drawings for people. We're not producing construction drawings and documents. We produce conceptual design. So like schematic, sketchy, fast, like before you hire a contractor, allowing you to know what you want out of the space so that the contractor, nothing against them because we love them and we are friends with them, but we don't want you to feel like, contractor just said, I can figure out a way to make this do it cheaper, faster, if you just build it this way. Well, do you know that's what you really want? Like, let's make sure you've gone through a different design iteration for the space and like know what you want. So allowing that homeowner to feel like comfortable and confident.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like,
huge.
I mean, like being in real estate, how many times, we like listen to people talk about this all day, but it sounds like you like help people collect their thoughts.
Correct.
And then give them a plan to go forward with.
That's
Because I mean,
right.
I think most people would find so much more success in real estate if they just sat back for a second, like let their visions run wild and know that most of that can be done.
Yeah.
A lot of it can be done, but I think people are really they're just too intimidated to give it a try.
Totally.
And they watch too much HGTV.
Yes.
And it's not that easy. It's not that simple. It's not that instantaneous.
Exactly.
But it all can be done. Yeah.
If you're smart and like think through the options with the person, a professional, but like somebody that gets it, like you haven't lived in that space yet, you might not know what the possibilities are. So like,
and I mean, a lot of people just need that like jump start, that little spark. I mean, even if it's not the exact thing, but just for somebody to say like, did you think about this or this? And I'm like, I didn't, and then I can do this. Yeah. So
exactly. Yeah. So that's urban.
And I know
design.
personally, you gave us drawings that we just handed to the contractor.
Yes.
And we said, build this, and there wasn't. Well, if you move this toilet over here, it was like. No.
Right. There were dimensions. Yes.
This is exactly, you don't need to do anything. Like there's no guesswork. You build this.
And that's a really good point. I'm glad you said that because when I said before that it's like conceptual and sketchy, well, to a point, like there are dimensions and there are basically exactly what the contractor needs to be able to price it up and do it.
You're just not giving blueprints.
Correct. Right. And permit drawings, like, usually a contractor works with an engineer that can have the permit drawings quickly done for the city permitting process or wherever you are. But yeah, our kind of expertise is in that, like thinking outside of the box, utilizing space. Like, for example, we have so many built-in shelves and like built-in systems in our house, in our row house, and this one, where it's like an empty space. You may not ever think like there's nothing that can be done there. Well, why not? If you need more storage space or more display space, like take advantage of that. I think a lot of people don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. So like we come in with kind of fresh eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Urban Row Photography.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Urban Row Design. We're going to forget about Anthony.
Okay.
We'll plug you.
Okay. No,
Urban Row
good.
Photography. Yeah. We'll put links to everything.
Great.
But if people want to find you, how do they reach out? What's your website, social media? All
Great.
That stuff.
So my website is urbanrowphoto.com. That's the best way to see my most recent work. My blog is all there. So my most recent weddings. And I prefer people to reach out that way because my form allows you to enter your date, your venue. So I can kind of like ensure that I'm available, all of that information. However, Instagram is also great. I'm like we talked about, I'm there all the time. So it's at Urban Row Photography on Instagram.
Okay.
And then Facebook, I'm on Facebook less and less. I really don't prefer it, but I'm also there.
Okay.
So yeah.
So website or Instagram, the two best places.
Definitely the best.
Can anybody still book you for 21?
Smaller micro weddings, yes.
Yeah.
Honestly, I have like November and December available. And there are no more no more Saturdays, I should say. Some Sundays, some Fridays, some Thursdays, yes.
Okay.
But limited.
Okay.
So
get
I
on it
say
then.
get
If you
on
want
it.
Naomi,
Yeah.
You gotta call her now. Anything else?
I think that's it. That was awesome.
This
Is there
is so fun.
anything else you wanted to say before we
No,
sign off?
that covered everything. You guys were great. This
I
is
know.
so
We were
fun.
worried we wouldn't have anything to say.
I know.
Naomi,
Thank you so much.
I think I am always worried that.
You're always
You're
worried about
really good at the
everything.
questioning is like a talent. That's a thing. You're good at it.
Let's end on a compliment. Naomi
Sure.
Cataldo,
Yeah.
Urban Row Photography. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you guys. I loved it.
See ya.
Hey everyone, thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast.
Fucking Mike Tyson.
All right. Hey everyone, thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast.
Make sure you follow us on social media. Check us out on searchbmore.com and subscribe to the podcast. And all future content
Yes.
is available to you
Yes.
if you subscribe.
Perfect.
Do it.
Thank you.
See
Good
ya.
job. Bye.